Hello, welcome to Shelby Radio. I am Shelby Carino, and this is episode number 685. And today we are breaking the cycle. We are detoxing the family energy for good. That is what we're doing. And I have to say that, this is a pretty big deal. This is a pretty big topic, and it's even interesting because the last 3 podcast episodes that I have done for the month of February here in 2025, I have not been able to be on camera and put it on my YouTube channel. I just had a strong objection to it. Um, Even in my mind, I was justifying it to, talk myself out of it. And then as the month has gone on and now we're in the final week of February, I'm like, "Oh, you know what? Um I'm ready to be on camera again. I'm ready to do that." I'm choking up about it. I'm like, "I'm ready to do this, okay?" And I just have to revisit this for a moment, all right? Let's look at the journey that we have been on in February. Okay. Let me just reiterate we are in 2025. It does not matter when you are listening to this podcast episode because believe you me, it will resonate with you, whatever time, space, and dimension you're listening to this. Okay. But we are in 2025. We are ending the month of February. And this is the year of the wood snake. This is all about shedding. This is all about the transmutation of energy. There is a massive spiritual cleanse happening in March. So, my March podcast episodes are going to be very interesting because there's going to be even more that is coming to the surface for the collective. And a lot of this is going to center around our sovereignty as it relates to family because we're having to, what I call, get back to the basics. We're having to remember who we are as not just humans, but as spiritual beings. And we've kind of been sidetracked for a while on this planet because there's been this battle of good and evil. And with that being stated, we play out these collective consciousness energies through our life. And what are the closest relationships we have in our life but our families, our biological families, or, sometimes even the chosen family. But we have these relationships so we can work out the dynamics in our vibration with other people. However, when it comes to the biological side of the family, there are things that you just cannot overlook, right? There comes a point in time where you have to call it like it is. This is what it is. This is how it's been, but it doesn't mean this is how it has to continue to be. So that's what I was focusing on in the month of February. So if we go back and look at the episode that I aired on February 4th, that was episode 682, and that was about family in transition. That was about explaining this dynamic that's going on in family where what we thought family was is not what family has become. And there's a reason family is now in transition, and some of these abrupt changes to family dynamics are happening. Okay. So if you missed it, go back and listen to episode 682. But then on February 11th, I aired episode 683, which was about how family energy isn't just gone because maybe you exit the family. All right. So if you are finding yourself leaving the family, having distance from the family, the energy's not gone just because you're physically removed. So make sure you go catch up on that episode. And then on February 18th, I aired episode 684, which was the emotional inheritance. And that is all about what we, as descendants from that family bloodline, inherit in the emotional family structure. So if you missed that, go back and listen to it. Now, remember, those 3 episodes are not on my YouTube channel. Those were the 3 episodes I did not feel like I could get on camera and record. So you have to go find it on whatever podcast platform you listen to. Okay. But today, we are finally going to end the month of February with breaking the cycle. Okay. This is about breaking patterns, breaking cycles, detoxing this family energy for good. Now, remember, when you're healing, when you're working in your bloodline energies, as much as we want it to be a one and done process, okay, like we do a piece of change work and then we want to have it just be like, oh, okay, we're good. That's it. Moving on with life. It'll never happen again. Well, it's not that easy, but when you do continue to work the process and you transmute energies in that line, you're building immunity to that. And we're going to get into that here in a second, okay? But once you do embrace it, it is going to detox you for good. Okay? You will get to that point, all right? Like this isn't something that you're wanting to keep up with and do for the rest of your life. The goal is to detox it and let it go, and then you build immunity to that. Okay. So let's really get into this. Now that I've kind of recapped what the previous 3 episodes have been about, I want to go into the personal space of this conversation, because this is really where I'm drawing this information from, is exactly from the time and space of what I'm going through, what my husband's going through, what his family on that bloodline side is going through, with his mother, okay, and siblings. This past month has been, I don't know, how do I say it? Um, Very telling. It's been a trying time. It's been filled with information, okay? And I don't want to say challenging as much as I would say it's required stamina, and it has required endurance, which is stamina, right? My dad always said to me growing up, Shelby, it's an endurance contest. And that was one of those programs that he put into me that has served me well in my life. When I am going through something and I feel like I want to quit, or I feel like I just can't do one more step, I hear him say to me, Shelby, it's an endurance contest. And then I'm like, you're right. It's an endurance contest. You just keep on going, because what's the alternative? You know what I mean? Like the only way to get through something is to get through it. So is there really even quitting involved? No, because then you just move on to something else that you have to endure and have endurance for. So you might as well just stay on the path that you're on and keep on going, right? So, um, I want to introduce this very basic core concept into my personal story of what I've been going through about how family energy can be toxic. And that toxic energy does shed when you are in transitions with family. And it is important and it is vital that for your own personal immunity and for your own energetic clarity, that you detox the energy. And if you are the empath of the family, which I can almost guarantee you are if you're listening or watching this episode today, okay, then you're taking on stuff you may not even know you're taking on. And yet you have to have the strength, the awareness, the courage to receive fully what is being placed upon you because it's skipping everybody else. And instead of drowning in your sorrows like some people do, where they turn to sex in an unhealthy way, or they turn to drugs and alcohol in an unhealthy way, or they turn into their mind in an unhealthy way by getting busy or not having the conversations, or staying in the disillusionment of what's going on, right? that's that doesn't help anybody, and especially it doesn't help you, because at some point in time it's all going to come back in anyway. It's already sitting in your vibration. Okay? So it's about, let's deal with that, get the immunity and get the clarity. So here's what my situation has been. I have told the story about how my dad died in November of 2023, a week after his birthday. And he died at home in his sleep, and nothing was actually wrong with him. Like, he didn't have a physical illness, okay? Even though he had died 8 years earlier on a football field and literally died and was brought back to life. You'll hear that in my courses or other podcast episodes or whatever. But no, he just passed, silently in his sleep. And then a couple months later, in January of 2024, my husband's mother had gone into the emergency room because she felt like, she couldn't breathe, and there was a lot of pressure on her chest and all these things. So it began a year's worth of work with his mother and helping her get to a space in her life where she could stay in her house the way she wanted to, continue to operate her business the way she wanted to, be mobile, go to the grocery store, go to church, go do the things that she wanted to do. So my husband and I really put our life on hold for several months at the beginning of 2024 as we were helping her get her house to a place where it would be easy for her to live and she wouldn't have to do a lot of work. Okay, like, we had to dehoard a lot of spaces and clear through a lot of papers and files, and get her business where it was easy to, or easier to be manageable, and things of that nature, because she worked out of the house. So we did all these things so she could have this quality of life, this standard that she wanted to have. And by us doing that, then there were things my husband learned. There were things I learned about his mother, about the family, in ways that maybe we didn't know, or we knew, but we didn't see it at that level. And then as we helped his mother clear, it cleared us. So there was this trinity, okay, this trifecta, this triangle between his mother and me and him, where we were working in this triangular fashion of just clearing amongst the three of us. And then we got to this place, or she got to this place where a lot of that energy had been used and utilized and all of that, and there wasn't any more of that energy to be um available, because once we cleared up her house, we did about 8 months worth of work in 2 months. So she had then about 6 to 8 months where she could ride the wave of the energy that we had done. And then once that energy was all done and finished and tied up in a nice bow, then she had another incident. She had another episode that sent her back to the ER, which sent her into another rehab facility to gain her strength, that, then moved her to another facility. And then it got to the place where it was like, okay, you can't go back to the house. Like, you're done. Like, you're not strong enough to now do this independently. You're going to have to be an assisted living place where you have help, because the health condition was getting worse. The ability to walk and do things independently was no longer there. And we saw the writing in the wall, basically, and we were like, yeah, this is going to go downhill, and she needs to be in a safer place. So not only did we have to deal with that, but we also had to go back into her house. And at this point, we literally had to not just detox the house, which meant we were detoxing the family energy again, but we were actually having to physically clear it on a level of taking it to 0 point, which meant, you know, basically all of that energy in the house was going to be wiped out, because the house, was going to be sold. So, taking her through that process as she's in another place now where she lives, and putting her on FaceTime, and letting her be involved in these decisions and things of that nature, was very beneficial. However, at this point, as we were clearing those energies, whereas before she would rebound, this time she wasn't rebounding like she was. So that told us, okay, she's the trifecta, the trinity, or the three of us in the triangle clearing together, detoxing that energy together, was running thin, because there wasn't, she wasn't bouncing back like she used to. So that was telling us, oh, wow, she's really getting more to her authentic self, her authentic energy, not what my husband and I maybe shared in the energy with her. So then it got to a place where, she had a stroke, and was sent to the ICU. And she was unresponsive for 9 hours. And when I say unresponsive, like she wasn't in there. And we talked to her to even now about this, and remind her, like, hey, this is kind of what happened. And uh she was unresponsive for 9 hours in the ICU. And, well, I had mentioned to Joe, I think it's time that, like, you need to call the family. Like, people need to now really kind of know what's going on here, because we didn't know if she was going to come back, if she was going to just be done and that was it. She was exiting. And so he goes and calls 4 people, but 3 of them were sisters, her sisters, 3 of the sisters, because she has 4 sisters. And so we leave the ICU room. He goes and he makes these phone calls. Not one of them answered, which I thought was very ironic. And I'm like, none of them answered. And he had to leave a voicemail with every single one of them. And so we go back into the room, and he's holding her hand, his mom's hand, and he's like, Mom, it's Joe. I just want you to know that I just called da 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 da, and he named off 3 of the sisters. And it was the most interesting event that happened after that, because I'm standing in front of her bed. He's to the side of it holding her hand, and I'm watching him, say this to her. And Now here go the cats. Hey, they're feeling the energy. And like you saw, it was like a lightning bolt of energy that entered the left side of her body, like her neck, and it looked like that lightning bolt of energy or a worm that is like wiggling down. You literally saw the energy drop back into her body and wiggle down all the way through her body. You saw her body shake, taking in the energy. And then all of a sudden, like a robot that had been asleep, her eyes just popped wide open. And she was like, "What? Huh, you called? Huh, yeah, yeah." And then she like she literally was responding to Joe saying, like, "I called." Da, 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 da. And in the humor of it all, Joe was like, scared the shit out of me. I almost was like, her, like, oh my God, what is this coming back to life? Kind of a thing. Cause it startled me because I was like, she was like a sleeping zombie. And then she just like woke up. And then and once I realized what had just happened, I looked at him and I went, I gotta go get the nurses. And so I went out and I looked at one of the ICU nurses and I was like, hey, she just literally came awake. And he was like, what? Because the medical staff had said that they had tried everything medically possible to get her to wake up, or in her condition that would at least stimulate something where there would be a response, and nothing was working after 9 hours. Okay. And so literally the nurse was like, hang on, let me go get them, go get the nurse that was actually in charge of her that day. And so he stands up from the desk and he hollers at that nurse that was taking care of her that day, and he was like, hey, number 16's awake, she's awake, because that was the room she was in. And they all come running into the room, and she's just kind of like looking around like, what's going on. And she even says, how am I alive? And we're all looking at her going, I don't know, we don't, but hey, welcome back, here you are, kind of a thing. And I was just like, oh good God. And because when she was unresponsive, I could hear her, like her spirit was in the room and flying around, but the minute she dropped back into the body, I didn't hear her anymore. So it was really interesting. And so I say this backstory to say we've been going through this since January. And she was in ICU for a good 7-8 days, I think. And then they moved her to like another rehab room in the hospital, and then she went back to where she was before and all that. And I say all of that because we're talking about family. And I said to Joe, I said, well, your work with her is done, because she didn't come back for you. Like she didn't come back from your voice. Okay. She didn't come back because you were holding her hand saying, hey, mom, it's Joe, your son. Okay. Shelby and I are here. Like, she didn't come back for us. Okay. But boy, you mentioned, the siblings, and, she hopped right back into her body and was like, what? Huh, 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 huh. And we were like, oh my gosh, she's not done. Right. Like, it's the family dynamic, it's the family tie. And so I knew when that happened, I was like, okay, here we go. There is something not done with the siblings, because she reacted to those three specifically. And so I was like, all right, well, we're going to go into a 21-day reframe basically with her, because she's always had issues not standing in her truth or whatever, in the dynamics of these sisters. So we were like, all right, well, we know she's probably not going to deal with it, especially in her state, but she will open the energy up for it, which means it's a female issue. And so it's going to skip Joe and it's going to go to me. And then I was at fuck my life. Excuse the French. But I was pretty much like, fuck my life. This is going to fucking suck. And why did I come in as a woman at this point in time, to deal with all of this? And then I'm like, well, I only had one sibling and Joe had none. So, yeah, I'm going to have a lot to learn, right? Because I'm a teacher. So I'm like, sure, let me figure out what these energies are about. And so yeah, that's basically what happened. So what happened was when she came back into her body, or whoever or whatever came back in, cuz I don't even think that was really her in there. Cuz it wasn't her personality or anything like that. And but it was interesting because the siblings did what the siblings were going to do. And they all immediately jumped right on in because none of them have boundaries. Okay. So they all jumped in. They all started trying to run the process. They all had their opinions. One even flew in from out of town and stayed for a week and was up in the ER with her and, doing what that sibling does best, which is pushing her network marketing products on the ICU nurses and his mother and all this kind of stuff. And we were just sitting back going, okay, you know what? This is going to have to happen. We just going to, cause cause I was this is your mother. This is the relationship she has with them. And at the end of the day, she came back in for that and we've got to let it ride. We've got to let it run. And at the end of the day, we're still watching out for her. And, he still has, control over the situation because that's his mother and, whatever. So we were just like, let the siblings do what the siblings are going to do. So they did. And boy, did they do that. And yet we helped navigate it. So her birthday was coming up and they wanted to do a bunch of stuff for her birthday. And, Joe kind of got pulled back into the family now because he had been estranged from the family. So now the family was pulling him back in and all of this stuff was happening. So it was actually all very good stuff that was happening. None of it was bad. And it was all beneficial for them. And it was beneficial for his mother. And in turn, it was also beneficial for us. And it created some good memories. It created some good moments. And, just letting everybody do what everybody needed to do. But at the end of the day, all of those things come to a close because when people aren't talking about the problem and the problem is still there, then once the party is over, basically, once everybody has run their energies, run their agendas, run whatever they were going to run, you're still left with the energy. And someone has to do something with all of that. And so I was like, well, she's not going to do anything with it. And, Joe is the empath. So he will receive whatever he needs to receive in his feminine energy, but he's going to throw it to me because it takes a female to clear it. Because it's a female damage that's going on. So with all of that story being said, just like we would clean our body of toxins, we have to clean the energy of the toxins. So if I look at the last month and a half and I look at the dynamic between his mother and him and myself, we've cleaned a lot of stuff up with the three of us, really over the last year and several months. But when the siblings came in, it wasn't about the three of us anymore. It was about what his mother was going to receive from the siblings that then really me was going to take in and process so I could gain compassion on a whole other level and empathy on a whole other level for his mother to actually see the sibling dynamics and why she never felt like she could stand up to them for herself in her truth. So I went through a lot of those learnings, and I would go back to her and say, "Wow, I understand your positioning in the sibling dynamic. I understand how you probably have felt because I have received those energies." And and so I was able to give that back to her because I understood it now, because I've been feeling it. I've been transmuting it. And I'm very much grateful that she's alive and she's been able to receive back my conversations with her and the understanding that I understand what she grew up in. And I didn't have to tell that to her, but why would I not? Why would I hoard that energy and not tell her? Why would I, you know, strip her from having someone understand the dynamic, right? So that's why I really tell people it's so important to communicate. It's so important to tell people what you're going through, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you've learned, especially if it'll benefit them and it helps them in their soul process, right? So, about a month ago, well, yeah, February, after she got out of ICU and things were kind of, settling down, um I felt like I needed to do a detox in my body. And it was actually a product that his mom represented in her naturopath business. And so I had a bottle of these drops, these cellular detox drops or whatever that you do like twice a day. So I'm like, okay, since we're detoxing this over here with the energy, I'm going to just go ahead and detox my body cuz I'm kind of in the detoxing mood. So I started, doing this protocol of this detox. And there was one specific night a couple of days ago where I went on to Chat GPT and I typed in what what does it feel like when you're detoxing heavy metals out of the body? Because this is a heavy metal detox. And so it kind of like spit back this information that, you can go through a healing crisis where your body may feel heavy or you may feel achy or a little sluggish or fatigued because, the body is like purging, those toxins out of the body. And for whatever reason, I just needed to hear that in my human. I needed to read that in my human. And I shared it with Joe too, because it just we were sitting there watching TV. So I shared it with him. I was like, oh yeah, I just typed this up. And well, right after I did that, maybe 5 minutes, if that, I felt this really weird push into my body. Like it was coming from the top and it was like pushing down. It was almost like, okay, this is a weird example, but when you're cooking and a recipe calls for brown sugar and you have to pack it, okay, like, a fourth a cup of brown sugar packed. And so you take a spoon and you kind of pack it in there. That's how it felt. It felt like, okay, it was like I was brown sugar and somebody was packing that into my body. And I just, felt this like packing of energy going through my body. And I just like, and this was all happening while we were watching a show, and I'm feeling all of it, and I'm processing it, and I'm like, oh, well, that's an interesting feeling. Oh wow, that just kind of like went further down into my body, and then I got kind of like woozy, like my even though I'm kind of like laying on the couch, I kind of was swirling, and then I was like, whoa, okay, that's going in. And then my psychic takes off and I'm like, oh, I'm receiving. Oh my God, I'm receiving the detox, like, and Joe doesn't know any of that because I'm not talking about it out loud. I mean, he would go insane if I constantly talked about everything I was feeling in my body when it happens. But it was like all swirling, and then I'm hearing in my head all the psychic energy, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm receiving the detox. Oh my gosh, that's what it's like to detox. This, wow, oh wow, I've been in the psychic energy and I've swirled it around, but oh my gosh, now the energy is really moving through my body. And oh my gosh, the detox I'm doing in the physical twice a day is happening. Oh, when I jumped on the rebounder and bounced it all through my spine, like, oh, I'm packing brown sugar, like, I mean, it's like all going through, and it's going through really, really fast. Okay. And I just sat with it in my silence because like nobody needed to know that until I guess now, because now I'm telling all of y'all. Okay. But that's what was happening. And then we finished watching our shows or whatever we were watching, and we go to bed. And we're probably in bed maybe 30 minutes, maybe. And my body wasn't like, I had received the energy that okay, I'm detoxing, and I understood it all, but then my body, I guess, wasn't done moving it through. So I get up, and cuz my stomach like bloated really bad. So that's how I knew it was in my spine. It was coming out of my spine cuz it was pushing out of my stomach. And so I get up, and I'm in the bathroom for like literally like over an hour. Not because my stomach was upset, but because I'm just like literally sitting there on the toilet just burping, or moving my legs, or rubbing my spine, or rubbing my hips. And it's like a woman giving birth. You're trying to push that spiritual energy through. And then my legs were going numb, and because the energy's trying to come out, like there's all these things. Now Joe was in bed sleeping, right? Like he doesn't know that's all happening, and I quit telling him when I go through those episodes, because honestly it doesn't matter, and the only thing that matters is I move it, and that's how I move it. And so then the next morning, I wake up and I'm just kind of getting dressed, and I'm like, "Oh my God, detoxing the family. This is my final episode for February, is breaking the cycle and detoxing the family for good, because that's literally what I've been going through in February, because I am empathic. I take on energies if it's conducive for me to take them on. Okay, if there's a benefit for me, I will just organically, take it on. And so through this process, I've realized how much immunity I am building in my system because of what I have been doing all of this time, but in rapid fire mode with the family because of the siblings on his mother's side of the family. So this has all been unresolved energy, and unresolved energy does get passed down through other family members. So because his mother hadn't dealt with this energy with the siblings, and I know why she hadn't, because me feeling the energy, I'm like, you know, I can see how hard that would be, because there's so many of them that it's just easier to go with the flow of the siblings than it would be to go up against them. So especially in her time frame of when she grew up with them. And so I understood that. And but unfortunately that got passed to Joe, and Joe became a scapegoat for his mother. And then I'd become his wife. Well, I'm a healer, so I'm going to transmute all of it. So I'm like, okay, fine, I'll take it on. And then it heals him and it heals her. So, or if they choose to receive the healings, I should say. So that unresolved energy that gets passed down happens all the time. And if you're married to someone or you have a close relationship with them, even if they're not your family, like your bloodline, you're going to receive that dynamic, especially if you're very, very closely connected to your spouse. Okay. And you're open for that. you will receive that. And I just so happen to be open. So a good way to describe how this gets passed down is, if you, since we're talking about packing brown sugar in a recipe, um, how many family recipes get passed down through time, through the generations? Like, oh, this was my grandmother's recipe for, this apple pie, and it's been in the family for generations. Okay. Well, if you look at this like family recipe that keeps getting passed down, instead of that recipe like being delicious and everybody wants to eat it, it's actually that toxic emotional baggage. Okay? That's this passing down of that energy, which is why I talked about emotional inheritance last week. So, when this unprocessed energy is not processed, then the impact is you do feel drained. You do feel confused. You do feel manipulated. You do feel emotionally reactive to things. And so for the month of February, Joe and I have just, well, I mean, especially for February, we've been more sluggish because things were coming to a close, and I knew I hadn't run it all through yet because we were still in it. We were still working it. We were still processing the energy. And then once I got to the place of, oh, now I know what this is. And now I can address it. Oh, now I can do a podcast episode on it. Oh, wow. Now I can actually record myself on camera. I knew, thank you, Jesus, I am at the end. Like I am detoxing that family for good. Because once it runs through and I build my own immunity and I give that immunity and that energy to Joe, it builds immunity in him. And then, we're done. So, and then it's just really back to his mother, right? And whatever she's going to do with it. So, let me take a breath. That's a lot. But I want to talk quickly about when someone is in a transition of their spiritual energy, whether they're staying in the body and transitioning the spiritual energy, or they're moving, to get out of the body, which we call death, or, they're ill. So they're shedding a lot of energy. That's what happens. Energy is shed during major life transitions, like an illness, like death, okay, like a spiritual awakening. And I said at the top of the episode that in March, it is a huge astrological month, like the new moon. Oh my gosh, I can't even remember. I posted something on Facebook about it the other day. Let me pull it up actually, because it's actually very fascinating. Um, let's see. We have, yeah. So March are calling it astro chaos. So it's eclipse season. Venus goes retrograde, Mercury goes retrograde, Neptune enters Aries for the first time since the 1800s, and the energy, as they're calling it, is going to be legendary, and it's not for the faint of heart, okay? And March is actually going to mark the beginning of a massive spiritual cleanse collectively. Now, if you are like myself and you run energy ahead of schedule, then you may already be going through your massive spiritual cleanse. But collectively, there's going to be more people going through the massive spiritual cleanse. So that's why I always tell my light worker people, January and February, take advantage of the heaviness, take advantage of the transitions, because if you go through it first, then you're able to help other people navigate, when they usually get hit with the energies. So for us, in my personal story, my mother-in-law's personal awakening from her unresponsive state when she was in ICU when she heard the siblings' names, that was the beginning of a new shedding. Okay. And that was something his mother chose to come back in for. All right. I mean, she was unresponsive for 9 hours. She even said, "How am I alive?" And we're like, "I don't know." Joe and I were like, I guess you weren't done. Okay. And so she even told me in the ICU room, she was like, "Well, stick around, Shelby. There's more to learn." And I was like, "Oh my, buckle your seatbelts." And boy, have I learned, right? So by her shedding that sibling dynamic that she never processed, because it's what pulled her back into her body. So she never processed it because it pulled her back in. Um, that's what left it for me and Joe to transmute it. So Joe and I were like, "Okay, let's get back to work." We're not done yet because this energy has not been cleared. So a huge key understanding is to understand that if family members do not do the work in their lifetime to transmute that energy, then that energy is still going to go somewhere, like I have stated in other episodes. And usually it is to the closest ones that are in proximity. And again, with Joe's mother, it goes to Joe. Well, if, it's a female energy that needs to be transmuted, it'll skip Joe, it'll go to me. And then I'll transmute it, and then I'll give it back to Joe. And then it builds Joe's immunity and his feminine energy. And then, his mother gets left with whatever's left, right? That's originally hers. So look at it this way. If you're in the forest, okay, everybody knows what the forest looks like. And we all know in the forest, there's old trees that look like they're going to fall at any moment, right? Because they're dead. So it's like when a tree falls in the forest because it's old. Well, what happens when that tree falls? What's going to happen to the tree now that it's fallen? Well, the environment is going to absorb it. The environment that surrounds the tree is going to absorb it and eventually process the decay of the tree, regardless of how long it takes. That's what's going to happen. So if somebody dies and moves out of their body's gone, but the energy is still there. And that energy gets absorbed by the environment, specifically by the environment that was close to that body, right? And then that's when that genealogical curse or patterns keep going and going and going until somebody stops it. So because Joe was an only child, but his mother was one of 7 siblings, and I only had one sibling, then it was very purposeful, and for his mother to come back after 9 hours of being unresponsive and, allow us the opportunity to, process all this energy from the siblings. So we really could understand what she had been through. Okay. Cause it was like, oh, wow, even though we knew it was at a totally different level. Okay. So when you're detoxing this family energy, it can show up physically, it can show up emotionally. And that's why my husband and I, Joe and I both were like, hey, we kind of feel like we need to detox our physical body because we were feeling heavy from the emotional detox. And even if we didn't really know why we were doing it, we may have had an idea, but we later realized all of it was linked to his mother. Even us taking product that his mother, represented in her naturopathic business. Okay. And that only helped his mother because it was like we were even using her product that, she would recommend. So when we have these physical mirrors in front of us, it helps us cleanse our body. It cleansed the energetic field, but we have to be willing to be aware to see it, listen to it, and then step into action to do something about it. Okay. So, how do you know if you're processing family energy or energy you can't explain? Well, first of all, you're going to have some unexplained emotions. And I've already talked about that. Okay. In other episodes, you're going to have sudden physical detox symptoms. You may all of a sudden, feel your stomach drop and you need to run to the bathroom, or you're going to feel like you have vertigo and get dizzy, or, you're going to take on a bout of anxiety and you don't even know where it came from. Okay. It's kind of sudden. It like hits you. Okay. You're going to have changes in your relationships. And you're also going to get clarity on people's true nature in those relationships. That happened at the tail end of this month of February, with Joe and his mother's energy, and then one of the sisters. Okay, which I'll see if it's appropriate to talk about that in a minute. But then another sign that you're processing is you'll eventually have an increase in your immunity system to manipulation, okay, or the family pattern, meaning you'll find yourself not getting pulled into it, and not because you're trying to avoid it, but because there's just nothing feeding it. Okay, so you'll notice that you'll start just having this, natural immunity to all of it. So you have to break what the enabling pattern is. And I was saying that a lot to Joe, which was, I was like, you have to quit enabling. And I didn't really know what I was meaning when I was saying all of that, but except for the fact that I felt like he was getting sucked in if somebody would, a family member would come and ask him to buy something or do something or whatever. And if the energy was off, I was like, okay, but you're enabling the behavior to happen. And that's not a good thing, because then you get hit with it, which means I get hit with it. And I don't want to get hit with this shit anymore. So like you need to build some walls and some boundaries to this. Like we need to do some work here, right? Because I say this to everybody, all of my students and clients. Energy is not personal. Okay? It's energy. So therefore, a personality is just a personality. All right? It's not the energy. It's a personality. And we have really good actors and actresses out here in their personality. However, once you chisel down to the core pattern of a person and you see where their energy stems from, you really see the heart of that person's energy, regardless of their personality. You see the damage, okay? You see the manipulation, or you see the trauma. And this is why some family members, or even friends or coworkers or whoever, but we're sticking with family right now. And this is why family members are not meant sometimes to stay in your life. So even all of this stuff that Joe and I have gone through with his mother and the family and the siblings, even though we mentally know who these people are, and if you meet them, you would be like, oh, they're very nice people. But if you really chisel down to the core energy of them, they're very toxic energy, and it stems from their mother. Okay. And no judgment. But if you get to a place and someone is not willing to see themselves for who they are, then that doesn't mean you have to stick around and be in the chaos. So one of the last big learnings that happened was one of the sisters that actually was like a second mom to Joe growing up has been in network marketing her whole life. And she's good at it, but she's also very, very pushy. very pushy. And she is very focused just on product, just on pushing product. But she does it under the guise of, but I care about you. Oh, but here, you need to take this product. And so I learned a lot with that sibling because this was the one that flew in from out of town. And when I noticed in ICU, when his mother was in ICU and this specific sibling was sitting here speaking to the ICU doctors about this specific product and how it would help her and this and that, knowing that Joe and I already knew that his mother had been on this product for over a year. But when I recognized her energy of, are you serious? Like, you're going to take this situation with your sibling and try to capitalize on it in the most intensive time, and you're going to do it under the disguise of, oh, but I care about my sister. Because energy doesn't lie. Okay? There's a time and a place for everything. And this person has broken every boundary of that. And they just kept breaking the boundaries. They just kept breaking spiritual law. It was crazy, okay? And this person knows better. Okay? They have the information. And so then here comes the loop between this sibling and his mother, where there was a new product that was getting released. And the sibling went to Joe and said, hey, they're launching this new product. I think this would really help if she has pain and this and that and whatever. And Joe was like, no, like, she has enough of this product here. She needs to use what she has. And, this is the way it's going to be. And he was like, but if you want to buy the bundle and send it to her as a test, and if it works, then I'll, be more than happy to get that for her. So long story short, there was a miscommunication on Joe's end, because I even told him, I'm like, you have to tell her you're not buying this. But he was like, okay, well, if you want to use your own stash and send it to her as a test, that's fine. So, but in his process, he was like, I'm not going to pay for it because I'm going to have you send it to her and she can test it. But that's not the way she received it. So she was still asking for the money. And so all of this energy blew up. But the truth and the reality was, and what his mother had to get to was, you do see that this was not about her wanting you to try the product because she cared about you and not wanted you to be in pain. There may have been a little part of that. But the true reality is she has been wanting to use you as her testimonial, her guinea pig. But she wants you to pay for all of this. And that's what it boiled down to. It didn't boil down to, an authentic connection relationship with her. It all came through product, right? So Joe ends up, realizing the error his way, because he realized he wasn't direct. And I told him, I said, yeah, you weren't direct in your language. So now you've got to pay the money for the product, call it a day, you get the lesson. And even though, he pointed out to that sister, that sibling of his mother's, I wouldn't have said what I said if I wasn't pushed. You were pushing me. I should have said no and stopped your pushing. And so it was so funny because when the exchanges happened, that sister, that sibling just kept deflecting and was like, I'm just glad you're there to take care of your mother. And literally, like, I'm reading, as he's reading the text exchanges to me, I'm like, wow. You've literally said to her, listen, I felt pressured, which is why, I didn't want her to have this at all because she didn't need it. But then I finally gave in because you were pushing me so much. So if you want to send it to her, great, I'll give it to her and we'll see if she tries it. But I wasn't expecting to pay for that. But now you want me to send you the money, but you're not taking ownership for what you did in your sales tactic, your manipulation, your pushiness. But shame on me meaning I'm talking as if I'm Joe. Shame on me that I didn't say no. No, I will not be paying for this. If you want to send it on your free will of your free, where whatever. So he learned, just like what his mother always did. This is what happens when you're not direct, because she had the pushier energy. And she used that energy to get her way and also get money. So I told Joe, I said, well, there you go. There's your lesson. And I said, and that's where your mom's gotten screwed most of her life, because the person usually who has the pushiest of energy is going to win. And if you're trying to sit here and be in the ethics, okay, but you've got to be in the truth of the ethics. And in order to be in the ethics and be in the truth, you have to be direct. You can't be nicey nice. Because if you're trying to be nicey nice and skirt the issue, well, guess what? If you're not direct and that person has a pushier manipulative energy and you're doing ethics, you're going to lose. That's why it's important to be in the truth and not skirt the issue. And that is one of the biggest lessons of a light worker. That's the hardest thing that we all have trouble with, me included, when I was going through my test, was just telling people like it was, stopping them in their tracks and saying no. Because they're running their pattern. They're running their unconscious pattern regardless. And they only see their pattern. And unless and until you come in, and that's what I had to teach Joe, unless and until you come in and say, no, stop pushing, they don't see what you're saying. Because they're just running what they're going to run. Because they're not in it with you. So I said to him, when that was the last text exchange, I was like, well, she'll get her kickback. She'll come across a client or somebody else, or somebody's going to stop her in her tracks at some point. I said, but now you know why it's important to not be skirting the issue. You say what you have to say. And when you need to say it. And then his mom got a lesson. And then I got a lesson because I had to stay out of it, because my tiger just wants to fucking pounce and be like, listen, bitch, this is what you're doing. Shut the fuck up. He said no. Like that's where I want to go with it. Okay, but no, I had to let Joe do his thing. And I just sat back and watched, and I was like, well, I tried to warn you. Okay, you didn't listen to your female. I tried to warn you. Okay, slap your hand, move on. Don't do it again, kind of a thing. So you don't want to enable people's patterns, especially family. You do not want to enable people's patterns in the family or your friends or coworkers or whatever, because you get hit with it if you're on a spiritual path and you're doing the ethics. You will get hit with it. So you have to learn it's not about being nice. It's about being effective. And that's why I tell people, don't get caught up in a person's personality, because the core energy of who they are is what you're dealing with. And that's what you need to address. And I think that's what Joe learned from this specific aunt, of his mother's sister. Okay, is that this isn't about them liking you. They'll probably respect and like you more if you would have just said, no, stop pushing me. But I told him, I said, but somewhere, I bet she now knows, well, I'm not going to be able to ask her, his mother or him to buy something, because it did kind of damage the relationship. All right. And so, these are very serious things that we deal with within our family, but our family is here to teach us the harder lessons. So for me, when I got to the place of seeing the true energy of Joe's mother's siblings' energies, it really made it clear to me on a whole other level than I already knew. I don't want to, so I want to have zero association with these people after his mother, decides to leave her body at some point in time, because they serve no purpose. And I don't want to play their game. because it's not authentic. And I don't need relationships like that. And neither does he. And even though we already knew that prior to his mom having a stroke and going into ICU and all of that, even though we already knew that, it became more clear after everything we've been through in February. Okay. And that's just a different immunity. It's a different packing of the brown sugar. Okay. In the recipe. It just got a deeper knowing. All right. So detoxing isn't just about removing the toxicity. It's about building the immunity, right? That's what it's about. It's about building the immunity to the toxicity. But you have to go through it to have that. Because the role of our sovereignty is that you want to be able to hold your own energy without feeling responsible for having to transmute other people's energies or unresolved issues. But you can't mentally just say, oh, I'm not going to process that. I don't want to deal with that. No, 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 no. That's a mental thing. You have to energetically be aware of what you're receiving. And if you're getting angry, if you're getting tired, if you're getting negative, if you're getting these other feelings and emotions, that means you're processing something that's unresolved. And a lot of times it doesn't matter where it comes from. You just need to move it. But if you can get to a place like I have or Joe has where we can identify where it's coming from, because we're dealing with the family, well, then you just get some more wisdoms. Okay. But this is about your sovereignty. So you may receive energy and that's important. Okay, great. But what's more important is you have to release it. So that's like even me putting all of this into this podcast episode. This is me releasing it. This is me now saying, oh, I need to share this with the world and whoever needs to receive these energies because I'm done with them. So this is the ethical way for me to release it because I've released it through my body, my energy, my emotions, whatever. And now I'm sharing it in a different form of release. Okay. So you want to be able to shift from how you unconsciously absorb something to consciously absorbing something. And again, that's being aware of your body, your mind, your energy, your emotions, your feelings, your environment, who you're around, because you are your best barometer. And if you don't want to learn yourself, you're missing out. So if you're one of those people that you're like, well, I don't know. I just wasn't aware. I didn't know. Okay, well, you're failing yourself. Okay, let me just put it to you that way. Because you're not looking, you don't even look inside yourself to see it. And you're missing out on the most important thing, which is you. So you want to be conscious to what's coming in instead of trying to deflect it. You want to bring it in so you can see it, so you can do something about it, because that's where the power is. Okay? So the awareness is important. The discernment is important, by asking, is it mine? But if you're already asking and you're trying to deflect it, but it's already in your energy field, okay, you're already down the rabbit hole. You got to do something with that. That's where you move to transmutation, where you're processing and releasing through movement, through breath work, through some kind of intentional cleansing. And then that's where you get your boundaries. That's where you strengthen your immunity to manipulations and any type of external influences. So let's break this down. What are the practical steps of knowing that you are in a detoxing pattern with family or others? That first step is awareness, noticing when energy is entering your field. The second step is discernment, asking yourself, is this mine? Before you actually engage with that emotion, before you engage with that experience. The third step is the transmutation, processing and releasing the energy through some type of modality, breath work, movement, some kind of intentional cleansing. And then the fourth step is where the boundaries show up. That's when your immune system strengthens in the energy. It's where you're not going to be as susceptible to manipulation or those external influences. So, if we recap all of this, and I'm well over an hour, but it was necessary. Detoxing family energy and how it creates a healthier, more sovereign existence for you is what's important. And it's why it needs to happen. Because if you look at asking yourself, what toxic patterns might you be unconsciously carrying in your family line, can lead to another opening of your spiritual awakening. So reflect on this energy of today in this episode. Reflect on the dynamics that I spoke about. Take steps in your life when it's appropriate for you to detox what no longer serves you, whether it's emotionally, energetically, physically, whatever the case may be. Because remember this as we exit the episode today. Detoxing is an act of self-love and spiritual evolution. The stronger we become in our own energy, the freer we are to live our truth. So I'm going to leave you with that. I really hope this has been helpful. Please share this with someone who is going through any type of similar situation and could benefit from the wisdoms I have gained. I know that Joe has gained, that we have been through within our family dynamics, because that's what we're here to do. Share the information, share the wisdoms, share the energy, so we're all still helping each other walk ourselves home to our own personal sovereignty. So, with that said, have a good rest of the last few days of February. I will see you in March as we move into officially this real big energy of the wood snake, where everything starts to really pick up and the uh really big spiritual cleanse coming in for many more people on the collective. All right. So have a good one, and I will be back next week.